10 years ago, renowned Canadian children's book author Eric Wilson visited my local elementary school. Out of the 200 students, I was the only one he chose for a photo and an autograph. That small moment gave me a stage, and the confidence that would later spark the creation of sweatpants and suits. Today, I place him alongside the billionaire Silicon Valley entrepreneurs and global CEOs I interviewed. In this episode, Mr. Wilson shares why he pursued a career in writing and how he traveled across Canada to craft his thrilling young adult mystery stories. Mr. Wilson, the stage is yours. What motivated you to pursue a writing career?
Well, Jerry, I'm first of all honored to be a guest on Sweatpants to Suits. It's a great thrill to talk to you, and I'm very much looking forward to it. And I'm really pleased that that simple act of, I suppose, kindness in a school gym 10 years ago has led to me having this chance to connect with you and talk in detail. And you're asking about how I began my writing career. You know, when I graduated from the University of BC, I got a year of teacher training, and then I decided to pursue my love of writing because I'd been writing stories from when I was a kid. And so I set up a little one-bedroom apartment, set up my typewriter, got some paper, put it in the typewriter, and I sat there looking at the typewriter. I had nothing to say. And after a while, I decided to pursue my other love, which I believe to be teaching. And so I went to a school in Surrey, which is near Vancouver, and applied for a job as a teacher. And I specifically asked if I could work with young people who had had trouble in school. And they were very pleased to offer me the job and said, choose from any one of our junior high schools, and they'd be happy to have you. So I ended up in White Rock Junior Secondary south of Vancouver. And there I found a purpose for my writing, because there I had these very interesting, intelligent kids who'd had trouble in their childhood of one sort or another. And so I thought, I'm going to get these kids reading, because of course they were all watching TV all the time at home. So I'm going to get you reading. And so I decided to bring in some books. I brought in a couple of books. They were successful. But anyway, in the end, I decided to write a story for my students because I could see what they needed. They needed action in the very first line. They needed lots of dialogue, so the page looks, it's got a lot of white space, not just a lot of text, and short chapters that always end with some kind of a suspenseful cliffhanger. I wrote my first book. I read it to the kids. They loved it. 5 years later and 5 books later, I ended up getting published. And luckily, the first book I had published was called Murder on the Canadian. Came out 49 years ago, and it's still in print, I'm happy to say. And so Murder on the Canadian, teachers and parents quickly discovered that this book would be a big hit with kids one way or another, definitely, because the first line of the book is, the package was ticking, a bomb. Well, that's how that story starts. And of course, once you read that to a kid, they've got to know what's going on. And so that book has had 49 years in print, getting kids to read, getting kids to learn about Canada, because it's been published all over the world and is very successful with teachers, parents, and kids everywhere. I'm very proud to say. And so that's what motivated me to get kids reading and to get kids to learn about Canada.
Oh, wow. So it was actually out of compassion that you want to increase students' reading comprehension that you started a writing career, which is amazing. And Canada is big place, right? Is a ginormous place if you look at on the map. So, how do you research the history and the atmosphere of the places featured in your book?
Well, Jerry, I soon discovered that the students in my classroom in White Rock knew very little about Canada.
Hmm.
And most of it was mistaken impressions. And so after Murder on the Canadian was published, I, of course, had a different class by then. But after it was published, I decided to write another mystery and have it take place in Vancouver. And I called it Vancouver Nightmare. And that's a totally different story. Same little boy who's a detective trying to solve these mysteries. But now it's about the dangerous world of the Vancouver underworld, and he infiltrates. It's quite an exciting story. And it came out and it was a big success. Again, teachers using it, parents using it to get kids into reading. And then I went to Winnipeg. I did a story called Terror in Winnipeg, and it touched on Minamata disease, which still is relevant in Manitoba. So I began to get into issues with my books. And so, but with each story, for example, Terror in Winnipeg, I would go and live in the community and learn about the community, different exciting local attractions that I could use in a mystery, and the history of the area, and looking always for that local angle so that my first readers would be kids who live in that community. They'd be reading about their own community. And I have had some wonderful feedback from kids who have read my books about their town. One boy wrote me and said, I can't believe you wrote a book about Yuki. And Yuki, of course, is Ukulele in British Columbia on the coast there. And I did a story there called Spirit in the Rainforest. So with each of the books that have written, the first step is always to go and live in the community for upwards of 2 months, getting to know the community. I'm trying to capture Canada as it is at the time I'm writing it, local landmarks, local people. And so that's the method I've used for all of my books. For example, I went to Quebec City at the time of the Winter Carnival, and that was an amazing experience. And I was able to do a story there about chemical weapons. And so I like to touch on a lot of different themes in my stories.
I think you are also promoting tourism at those places that you wrote in your book, which is amazing too. And has young readers or locals ever reached out to share their own stories or connection to the places in your books?
Oh, yes. I've been, as you know, Jerry, been to many schools over the years. And one of the things I always have enjoyed is receiving these big, huge envelopes from the kids in the school, all of them making suggestions for how their town, for example, Sarnia, Ontario. I remember a big envelope arrived from the school in Sarnia suggesting ways that I could make the great mystery for Tom or Liz Austin in Sarnia. And so I've really appreciated that the kids, through this, the kids are looking at their own town with new eyes. They're looking at it. How could this be starring in a mystery? What is spooky here? What is interesting here? What about the history? All of that is what I build into my stories. And kids get that. And they write to me about the history of their town. They write to me about a local landmark that could be haunted. It's really exciting to receive those kind of messages.
Oh wow, a little snapshot from this place and that place, a little snapshot of collections of Canada. I love that. And are there any locations in Canada you haven't written about but would love to explore?
Well, I did go up to Dawson City in the Yukon Territory, and and I did research a story which I have not yet completed, but is one I am working on. And Dawson City, you see now, here's a perfect example to go up there and experience this community and think about the people who were there searching for that elusive gold. And of course, it was a tragic story because people arrived. There was a worldwide depression at the time. People arrived from all over the world and thinking that they would just get into Dawson City and pick up gold in the streets. Of course, it wasn't true at all. The best they could do is get work as laborers. And some of the stories were heartrending about these poor people. And when I was up there in Dawson City, I was able to be a resident writer at Pierre Burton House. And in Pierre Burton House, they had all these diaries that had been kept by men and women who had gone up to Dawson City and someone had died, whatever. And I read those diaries, and of course, your heart just was just broken by what happened to these people and their friends. It was really a big tragedy. And as I say, I haven't yet completely written that book because I'm having a little trouble with it because it's such a sad story.
Oh, Dawson City, eh? Dawson City, Yukon.
In the Yukon Territory, yes.
I bet it's extremely cold up there, right? The time you went.
Well, actually, I went in the summertime. I wanted to do a
Oh,
summer story. And so it was actually very warm. It's very beautiful there. And, you know, it's a heritage community. And so the streets, for example, they don't have sidewalks, they have boardwalks. It's really wonderful. And they have many things to see in Dawson City. That whole area is most interesting. And the people that I met, you know, it's a place that I found a lot of people who go to live in Dawson City want to get away from the big cities. There are people who want to get as far away from the big cities as they can. And so they were all just in a way, not unlike the people who came up looking for that gold. They're the people, the adventurers and that sort of thing. So I got a lot of material and I'm still working it through to get a really strong story out of the Yukon Territory.
Yukon Territory. That's uncharted territory, eh? And who are some of your favorite mystery writers and how have they influenced your work?
I'm currently reading a mystery by the British author Julian Simmons, one of my favorites, a story called The Man Who Killed Himself. Great story. He's one of my top favorites. An American author, Michael Connolly, fabulous author, love his stuff. And a third, especially an influence on me, a Canadian author, Leslie McFarlane. He was hired by a New York company to create a series of mystery books for kids. And he created the Hardy Boys and wrote the first of probably a dozen or maybe 2 dozen of the Hardy Boys mysteries. Wonderful stories. And that's the number one influence on me. When I started to write, Jerry, I wanted to get those kids to read. And I remembered myself because I myself was a reluctant reader until my aunt gave me a copy of one of the Hardy Boys mysteries. And I just loved it and got into it. So I thought I'll put the same hooks into my book as in the Hardy Boys. That's why the action happens very quickly. Why there's a lot of suspense and a lot of mysterious strangers. But I took it one step further. I combined the Hardy Boys with the Agatha Mystery School of Detection, so that each of my books, for example, Murder on the Canadian, each of my books, the reader is challenged to follow the clues to solve the mystery and figure out who the villain is. So that makes it a lot more fun for the readers of my stories.
I don't know if you remember Finding Waldo, having that little stick figure popping up from
Yes,
different places, dressed the
yes,
same. Reading a mystery novel is like finding Waldo. You just gotta piece it out, and at the end, like either you guessed it or you didn't, and if you guessed it, that's satisfying feeling that just wash over you. I love that feeling. And
it's
how did you learn to write mystery novels, and what lessons do you have for future writers?
I learned to write mystery novels the hard way.
The
If there's
hard
a
way.
hard way to do it, I will find the hard way to do it. I decided I'm going to write books, as you know, for reluctant readers, and so I wrote novels and that sort of thing, and very successful with the kids. But I couldn't get a publisher for a long time. I ended up writing 5 books, but you know, the biggest mistake I was making is that I was not planning my stories. And you know, I met a lady over in London, England. She was the children's book editor at the Bodley Head Publishers, a lady named Margaret Clark. And she asked me to, she'd read my very first novel called Fat Boy Speeding, never published. And she read it and she liked it enough to ask for a meeting with me. And she said, I can publish it, but the next book you write, I would like to read it very much. But she said, take, take these books I offer to you. I'm in her office in London. Take these books I offer you because these are books on the craft of writing a mystery. And I thought, what? There's a craft to this? I'm just making it up as I go along. Indeed, there's a craft to it. And those books that Margaret gave me changed everything for me because I learned to plan. I learned to, for example, with Murder on the Canadian, I knew there would be a murder in that story, but I also wanted to have three jewel thieves traveling on the train disguised as nuns. Well, as soon as I started plotting out the story, I realized you can't have two stories in one book, and I got rid of one of the stories, obviously. Um, but that was all thanks to Margaret. So therefore, my advice to writers, go and get books by authors who have written. Stephen King has written a wonderful book for would-be authors. Other authors have done the same. Other people have written books. There's a wonderful book called How to Get Happily Published. And I read that many years ago. And the authors don't just tell you about how to craft a story. It's more about promotion because once your book is published, it needs to be promoted. And it's up to you as the author to do the promotion. And they gave lots of ideas. And I started when Murder on the Canadian came out. I took over my promotion and I got all kinds of publicity out of that because it was a different approach. And so if you want to be an author, get yourself some books on the subject and learn from the books at your library or on the internet, however you get your books. That's the way to do it, I believe.
I love that lesson. Learn how to write a book by reading a book.
Yes.
Yeah. Beyond solving a mystery, what do you hope young readers take away from your stories?
Many of my books have quite a serious side to them. They're all mysteries. They're all about our country. But when Tom and Liz, my two main characters, are in these communities, sometimes they get involved in stories that allow the author, me, to make some serious points to kids, especially about power, because I write a lot about kids being in situations where they feel they have no power. And I say to them, you do have the power. You have the power to tell, and you can do that. And so I have some quite serious themes in many of my books. And I'm very proud of that because kids are, um, are just reading these stories and going in thinking it's a mystery and coming out with something to think about at the end.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's awesome. And which of your books you say was the hardest to write and why?
A book called The Kootenai Kidnapper, a story set in the interior of British Columbia in a community named Nelson, where I used to live. And I was a teacher there, actually, and a writer. And The Kootenai Kidnapper takes place in Nelson and is based on the story of Clifford Olson, a notorious killer of children. And I wanted to write a story in which Tom Austin is kidnapped because he makes mistakes. And so this is a very serious book. It took me many, many months to research and about um, how to, how these crimes occur and how kids can protect themselves. And simple little things, for example, that would never occur to me anyway. I remember reading in one place, to tell a child that if someone is going to try to carry you away, that if you are completely limp, your body is very, very difficult to lift. I mean, that's a silly sort of thing, but it is the type of information that I built into The Kootenai Kidnapper. But it was very depressing and distressing to think that anyone would want to harm children. But I did want to write a book that would help kids because, there are plenty of books out there saying, don't take candy from a stranger, but it's better, I think, to have it in a mystery where you're reading an exciting story and at the same time absorbing this information about the do's and don'ts of what to do in a kidnapping situation. Same thing with my book about Disneyland, Disneyland Hostage. It's a story about kids taken hostage at Disneyland. And what do you do in a hostage taking situation? I wrote that book back in the years when there were a lot of hostage takings taking place. And I wanted to help kids if they should be caught up in a situation like this with watching Liz and her friends act out the correct way to behave and how to keep things low key and the wrong way to behave, which is to get things all riled up. So that's Disneyland Hostage. So lots of my books have a serious theme along with the fun of the read and learning about a place like Disneyland for that matter.
I love that lesson. You're raising awareness for a societal situation, but you're also promoting common sense to these young children to be alert in these type of situations. And I hope you're not retiring from your craft anytime soon. So what's next for you?
I've got some ideas that are still percolating in my head, but one thing that is happening right now is that, as I mentioned, in 2026, Murder on the Canadian turns 50 years old. And so my a friend and business associate, Blair Jensen, who runs the Eric Wilson Mysteries Facebook page, has devised a challenge to theater companies to produce a production of Murder on the Canadian, because you see, many years ago, I wrote a play based on Murder on the Canadian, and it's been successfully produced right across the country. And so Blair has issued this challenge to theater companies to produce the show Murder on the Canadian. And if anyone would be interested in getting more information about this or anything else I've talked about, we do have a website that Blair designed, a beautiful website, and it's called ericwilson.com. Very simple. And if you go there, there's a contact link so you can write a message if you're interested about the theater or anything else. And also, you will see the covers of every one of my books. And if you hover over any of those covers, there will be a link appear to take you to wherever they happen to be available if you would like to read them. So they're available worldwide. And they're also, by the way, I'd like to mention, Jerry, I'm very proud to say that my books have become very successful in other languages, particularly in Spanish and particularly in Chile, where they have a huge following in the Spanish language. And I'm awfully proud to think of kids as far away as Chile actually reading my books about Canada. In fact, it was very nice to meet some students from Chile who were in Victoria in September, and I was invited to come and speak to them, and they had all read my books in Spanish, of course, but they were all very fluent in English, and we had a terrific question and answer session and a slideshow of pictures of my different parts of my life and my research. And so it is very nice to say that my books are being read by kids in other countries as well as in Canada.
That is such an awesome story. I'll make sure to link your website and also your book on Amazon to the podcast description so listeners can reach out to you easily. And it has been an absolute honor talking with you again, Mr. Wilson. You are a legend.
Well, thank you so much. You couldn't say anything nicer, Jerry. I really do appreciate it. And, just this chance to talk to you, really, it's really an enjoyable part of being an author.
Thank you so much, Mr. Wilson. Success isn't just about a title. It's a journey. Sweatpants and Suits interviews the world's most interesting career professionals, uncovering the lessons, setbacks, and breakthroughs that shape fulfilling careers. Whether you're just starting or making a next big move, these conversations will help you get there.